All right, so when we're looking at wheelchair equipment, there are some notes that are posted up on Canvas that has kind of the different components of a wheelchair. So basically, I'm just going to walk through. I have a variety of chairs out, as you can see, and I'll just show you some different parts that are either standard or that are unique to these individual chairs. So just looking at this chair, this is kind of our standard wheelchair. This is sort of a, like if you think of like an over-the-counter or off-the-shelf type chair, there's nothing custom about it. They do come in different widths, and so we're going to practice measuring for that here shortly. But this is a standard 18, I think, and there's standard width that they come in. And if somebody does not have a need for a custom chair, this would be typically what we would order for them. It's the most cost-effective. It's considered a lightweight chair, although if you pick it up, it's not all that lightweight compared to other chairs. So there's other lighter models. For example, if you were using a sports chair, which we'll look at later, they're a lot lighter compared to this. But this is kind of your off-the-rack chair that you would expect to see. So some different things when we look over, these are just different wheelchair components that we talk about. So these are the push handles, and this is for the caregiver to help, obviously. These are our armrests. I know you have some familiarity with armrests. The thing to note is these would be considered desk length armrests, so they're 3/4 length long. These are really nice because they allow you to come up close to a table or a desk. Versus a full-length armrest, which you can see down on that transport chair, and I'll show you that in a minute. A full-length armrest comes the whole way, which provides really good support with the upper extremity. However, it limits your ability to get close to a surface like a table. So when we're working with getting a patient a wheelchair, we have to take into consideration, do they need the support on their arm? For example, did they have a stroke and they have limited mobility and function in an upper extremity and they need that support? Versus are they going to be somebody who is going to be pretty active with getting up to different surfaces throughout their house, engaging with their family, that this would be a better option. With the armrest, not only do we take into consideration the length, but we look at how it is, how it moves, if it does move. So most of our armrests come all the way off. Sometimes they stick. And so they're fully removable. I'll show you some other options with armrests on some of these other chairs. Sometimes they swing away, they swing back, and some of them are just fixed and not movable at all. Just be careful, because I see this all the time. I think people are just throwing them back on. If you put an armrest that's a 3/4 armrest on this way, backwards essentially, it's not going to provide the proper support for the patient. There are times when we would actually do this on purpose. For example, if we're having somebody go into standing and they don't have the shoulder range of motion to adequately push up this way, like they can't get their shoulders back this way, and this is too low, if this was too low for them, if we turned it this way for training purposes, then they have a better surface to push from. So there are some instances where you might purposely put it backwards, but just be careful with that. Next thing that we're looking at here is going to be the seat back and then the seat itself. So these are canvas seats. They have a little bit of cushion, but if you spend any amount of time, you'll find that that little bit of cushion doesn't really do much for you. The nice thing about having these seats is that we can easily pull up on the seat to collapse the wheelchair. They don't provide really good support. They don't necessarily keep the person in really great alignment. So if somebody is going to be spending a good portion of their days, for instance, if they've had a spinal cord injury and the wheelchair becomes their primary means of mobility, these are not ideal because they don't provide that support. They also are not really good for pressure support, and so we have increased pressure, for example, on the ischial tuberosities, which are the kind of bony part of your butt. So really nice for someone who's using it, occasionally, maybe. If you think about maybe a loved one that needs one, if you're going to be going over long distances, like if you're at the county fair or something, it can be very handy, but not for long term. We also have then the brakes. Brakes are either push to lock or pull to lock, and each wheelchair is slightly different. when we think about the brakes, sometimes it doesn't matter whether or not somebody uses push or pull. However, if somebody has weaknesses in certain areas, it may be easier for them to pull or to push to put the brakes on. So you would need to take that into consideration. You can order it the opposite way if needed. Oftentimes, it's going to be a push on. These ones are a pull. So you can practice with the different types, but it's one way or the other. The other thing, and some of these can be added. These are brake extenders. These can be added to wheelchair brakes. So what would occur is you would take off the rubber part. You would get brake extenders that work with that wheelchair. These ones actually don't. But when you add the brake extenders, it makes it easier to put the brakes on and off because you lengthen the lever arm. So if somebody has significant weakness, just by adding these, it can really make a difference in the person's ability to independently use their brakes. All right, so then if we look at the wheels, this is our drive wheel and our push rim. Push rims, our drive wheels can be either air-filled or they can be these hard rubber ones. There's benefits to both. So the hard rubber ones, you don't have to worry about getting a flat tire, which is really great. However, they're not as easy to maneuver the chair. So like when we look at some of these other chairs over here, you'll see that they have air-filled tires, which make them more advantageous if you're going to be doing sports and things like that. So they have their benefits, but they also have their cons. The push rim is typically either a metal. This is a metal component, but it has a little bit more friction, which makes it a little easier. So if you have somebody that has weakness, sometimes what you'll see is you can add kind of like a Theratube. It's like a rubber tube around it that helps increase the friction, if you will, to make it easier for the person to push. So there are ways around doing that. We then have the caster wheels. These are going to be kind of what allow us to steer. They're smaller, again, air-filled or the hard rubber. You can see different sizes on different chairs depending on the purpose of the chair. We also then have leg rests. Not all chairs have leg rests. There's a variety of different types of leg rests. So these ones are going to be elevating. The nice thing about elevating leg rests is that if the person needs extra support and let's say they have swelling in their extremities, it allows you to raise them up to help with that. They're also adjustable by length, so I would need longer ones because my knees are bent. They have the calf support, they have the foot plate. These both slip up out of the way. In order to raise the leg rest, you just lift up on it. To lower it, if you just lift slightly, and then push or pull, it depends on the leg rest, the toggle beside it, it'll let you lower it back down. And then they also swing out of the way. This is one of the more confusing things about leg rests. So in order to hit the part to make it swing, if you come from the outside and push in on the silver, they'll swing out. Once you have them out of the way, you can just lift up and take them off. You'll notice when you take them off that there's an area that has two holes. This is a narrow. There's also really wide ones. So when you're looking for the leg rests that fit the chair, so for example in the back, we have tons of wheelchairs and the leg rests are mostly off and they're in a pile. And that happens a lot in therapy clinics whenever you are looking for wheelchairs. Just pay attention to the width here of this and it'll give you a good indicator of whether or not you need a wide or a narrow to fit your wheelchair. So if you see here, there's the two pegs that they line up on. In order to put this back on, you don't want to put it out front because it won't line up. You're going to hold it off to the side, line up the two pegs, and then click it back into place. And so that takes a little bit of practice just to get used to those. Leg rests can also be non-elevating, so you have to take into consideration the needs of your patient. Non-elevating leg rests are lighter and they're cheaper, so that's like typically what comes on an off-the-shelf. But if you have somebody who has problems with swelling or if they've recently had surgery or something like that, that they would benefit from the elevating leg rest. As long as there's a reason why they would benefit, then typically they can get the elevating leg rest. On the back here, we have 2 pegs. These are really nice because if we step on them, it allows us to tip the chair back like we need to do to get up and down off a curb. However, you also have the ability to add these. These are going to be anti-tipping wheels. So if I have an individual who I know is at increased risk of tipping the chair backwards, so for example, if I had a patient who had Parkinson's and every time he goes to stand up, he pushes backwards, which is something that we see typically. They push back instead of leaning forward to come up. They're more likely to tip backwards. Adding these onto here will keep the chair from tipping. These ones don't actually fit this chair. I'll show you in another chair, there's ones intact. The thing about these though is that it doesn't allow you to do things like curbs. You can, without taking them off, once they're properly installed, flip them up so that you can get up a curb, but you can put anti-tipper wheels on as well, which can come in very handy. Any questions about this chair? So again, in order to fold the chair, just pull up on the seat, push it out, and just make sure the chair is pushed all the way down before you would get in the chair. So that's just our typical lightweight. This is another version of a lightweight one. We've got these ones recently. And the reason I want to point this one out to you is because if you notice, it's very lightweight compared to that one, but it's also a lot less sturdy. So this would not be an ideal chair for somebody who's going to be using the chair more often or be a little bit rougher on the chair. The nice thing about these ones is they do have the armrests that just swivel back out of the way, so then you don't actually lose them when you take them off, which is nice. They do have leg rests. I just didn't pull them out. They're in the back. And again, these brakes are going to be pull where those are pushed, so you can practice with those. Like I said, chairs come in all different sizes. So this is a smaller chair. This would be considered a pediatric chair. Nice and lightweight, comes in a fun color. This one, no. Some of them have really easy wheels. This is essentially a button and you can pop it off. I thought it was not. So that's just a different one. These ones also, you turn it a certain way. They just, the armrests come up and out of the way. They just swivel. And then you put them down and lock them back in. Has anyone ever seen these types of chairs before? So these are called a transport chair. They're relatively newer. They're very lightweight. They're easy to get in and out of a car. But if you notice, they're basically just 2 caster wheels. They don't have the big drive wheel. So this type of chair is not meant to be used for any long-term things. It's also not meant to be used for someone to push the wheelchair. This is just purely my loved one that needs a wheelchair occasionally, maybe to go through the store or at different events. And so these are really handy, especially if the person's caregiver is having a trouble with the weight of a regular chair. So for example, with my patients that are a little bit more elderly or frail, this is really nice. Specifically, I've noticed if the husband needs the chair and the wife is, if you think of kind of like I'm gonna say like a stereotypical older woman who's like 5'10" and weighs 100 pounds and she's got to manage her getting the chair in and out of the back of the car, this is much easier. They typically come with a seat belt. The thing to note is that the brakes are the same brake mechanism basically as those chairs, but they're on the back here, so the patient is not able to put the brakes on and off themselves. They do have leg rests that swing away and come off, but these are non-elevating leg rests, so much lighter weight. So it definitely has its benefits. However, it's not a chair that answers everything, but it does make it nice for people who need it. And the armrests do not move. They're also full length, but super lightweight. This is actually, this was somebody in the wheelchair who has a spinal cord injury. So this chair has a variety of customized pieces added onto it. You'll notice that the cushions are completely different. The backrest is molded for that individual. This cushion can come off. This is a foam and gel-based cushion. It sits much lower and it's tipped back as well. All of these wheelchairs, you can change kind of how it's tipped if needed. So for example, if you're working in a facility and you have patients who are kind of sliding forward out of their chair all the time, you can dump the chair back a little bit just by changing some of the mechanics in the back. This one also has the anti-tippers in place. And again, this one, it's not letting me. There we go. They can come up and out of the way if you had to do stairs. This is the air-filled tire, so it makes it really easy to go on varying surfaces, but you do run the risk of getting a flat tire. Much smaller caster wheels. You can see here these are not elevating leg rests. They also do not come off the chair. They're fixed into the frame of the chair. And this is because the person who is in this chair has spinal cord injury, so it's not like they were getting up, standing up to transfer. They were doing a lateral transfer. Sit in the chair. These just flop out of the way, so the person essentially would just go laterally out. This is just a protector from clothes in the wheel because it doesn't have the sides like you would expect in some of the other chairs here. The brakes, I don't know what this brake is, not even the right spot anymore. The brakes are completely different, very on and easy to go on and off. It is a lightweight chair. A lot of the weight actually comes from the custom back and the custom cushion. If you remove those, the frame itself is really lightweight. You can see in the back kind of how you could adjust the back of the chair as needed. It has a seat belt in the back here too. This chair is obviously wider than some of the other chairs we've talked about. The other thing that makes this chair unique is this is a high back chair. So this gives extra support for somebody who has limited trunk control as compared to these other ones that sit below the shoulders. This is going to provide support above the shoulders. Some of them even have headrests or tall enough for a headrest. This one also has a reclining back. As you can see, the person can basically lay almost all the way back. If you had leg rests on, it could be kind of like a little bed. Reclining backs and tilt backs are going to be completely different. So in a reclining back, you change the angle with the hips. In a tilt back chair, the angle stays the same. What ends up happening is the chair just tilts like this. On the frame it would do that, so the wheels would stay down. So the chairs can either be reclining, they can have the reclining or tilt back feature. Some chairs actually have both. And you would typically use these for people who are in chairs much longer throughout the day and are not able to get themselves in and out of the chair. And so it's just for pressure relief is why you would do it. But otherwise, pretty much everything else is the same on this chair. And then another chair, this chair and the blue chair, actually I think were the same person's chair, just at different points in time. So again, custom molded back, custom cushion. This is a foam cushion, it's relatively lightweight. This one has the extenders on the brakes to make it easier. So if you want to see how much easier it is, you can pop it off and then put it on and you'll notice the difference about how much easier. This one, the foot plates look a little bit different. There are some wheelchairs that actually just have a single plate across too that would not flip out of the way. These ones you can flip out of the way. That needs tightened. And then you can actually remove these ones versus those other ones you couldn't. They lock on slightly different than your standard wheelchair. Obviously, fun pattern on this one. These armrests are kind of cool. There's a little lever you can raise and lower the armrest based off what the person needs support-wise. You can also just take them all the way off. The pneumatic tires, push rims, the guard for the spokes. Quickie is the brand of this wheelchair. A lot of our custom wheelchairs, especially sport type wheelchairs, are Quickie chairs. So this is a more sport type. You can see it also has a belt. As you move into more customized sports chairs, oftentimes the wheels are angled like this to make it easier to go faster and propel faster. But these are some different things about chairs. Is there any questions about the equipment? These are just manual chairs. And there's even more different variations that you can see. We don't necessarily have all the different variations. Whenever you get into electric wheelchairs, it's like the sky's the limit with those. There's some chairs that cost upwards of $40,000 plus because they have functions like going from sit to stand. They have tilt back, recline back. Some of them go really super fast. Like I was on one time that goes I think max speed of like 10 miles an hour, which is ridiculously fast in a wheelchair. There's some that have like 4-wheel drive capabilities, so you can really get really expensive in a wheelchair quickly. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to have you take some time to get to know some of the different chairs. So you can grab some chairs out of the back. You can look at these ones with your partners. But you're also just going to get in a chair and just kind of get a sense for putting the leg rest on and off, putting the brakes on and off while you're in the chair. The other thing is I want you to practice propelling the wheelchair. And so if we're going to propel forward, we're just going to go forward with our arms at even speeds and even pressure. If we want to turn, there's a couple of different ways depending on the type of turn that you want to do. If you want to do a very tight turn, if I'm turning, let's say, to the left, I would push forward with my right and pull back with my left, which would allow me to turn in place. Versus if I wanted to do a wider turn, I would just push left or less with my left side. I wouldn't have to necessarily pull back. It would allow me to do a wider turn. You can go backwards. Not only can our patients push with both their hands, they may also be a foot propeller. With this, it's quite nice because it's easy to steer. So if they have lower extremity strength but not upper extremity, it's also a good exercise if you're working on improving someone's hamstring strength. We also sometimes have individuals who push with one arm and one leg. If, for instance, if they've had a stroke, you would have one leg on the leg rest, one arm wouldn't be working, and they would push with one arm and one leg. So if you want to practice this, make sure you have that leg rest. That's a little bit harder because, as you can imagine, since you're pushing all on one side, it makes you want to kind of turn. However, you use your foot to steer and your arm to propel. So a variety of different ways. You know, if let's say you had an arm a fracture in your wrist and a fracture in your ankle, you could always do opposite too, you know, depending on what the patient would need. So a variety of different ways to push, okay? In your second year, I think it's in rehab class, you will learn some advanced wheelchair skills, like how to get in and out of the wheelchair onto the floor as a patient, how to do wheelies. I always get people wanting to do wheelies early on in the program, and that's perfectly fine. However, you have to learn how to do them correctly. Oftentimes, the wheelie part, kind of your balancing part, is much further back than what you're comfortable going. So if you want to practice wheelies, my only condition is until you are proficient and you can just kind of hang out in them or move in them without losing your balance, that you only ever practice getting back into a wheelie position if there is someone behind you with their hands on the handles, so that you don't dump yourself backwards. I have seen plenty of students do that. This floor might look like it's carpeted, but it's really just concrete with a very thin layer of carpet. So do not allow yourself to pop backwards. If you are practicing wheelies, you want to take the leg rest off, because it does change your center of gravity, and until you're good at wheelies, it's much easier to do it with your leg rest off. And if you're interested in learning more about doing them, I'm willing to show you. It just seems that every year, as soon as we break out the wheelchairs, people want to start the wheelies. So I'm just putting that disclaimer. Do not do wheelies until you're comfortable. You can do them as long as somebody's with you practicing. Okay? All right, so go ahead, get with your partners, grab a chair, go over the different components, try some of these chairs out, and feel free to go out in the hallway. I'll move the table out of the way to practice going down the halls so that you can practice propelling the wheelchair.